The newest Tiger is here on World of Tanks console, and today's video is going to aim at showing whether or not this tank is actually worth purchasing as part of the Ultimate Season Pass and the new update that World of Tanks console and Wargaming have actually decided to come out with. And it is, of course, the Tiger 1 A18, the Czechoslovakian Tier 7 premium tank that comes as part of like that big bundle where you can essentially get a load of extras onto the Season Pass and the tank comes with it. Now, it will cost you 6,000 gold for those of you who want to actually purchase this tank. So it's not necessarily expensive, but if you weren't going to want the additional benefits, then I guess it's not necessarily a great price is what I'm trying to say. Other than the fact it may or may not be a good tank, and hopefully this video will showcase all about that. But yeah, essentially £4,000 or 4,000 gold for the tank itself, and you can see that this is the first 3-shot auto-loading heavy tank from the German line within the game, slash, you know, Czechoslovakian line. So it's basically got the gun of the Czechs in the game with this 3-shot rapid-firing autoloader that actually has very good DPM. You've got about 2,200 DPM with this, and you can see the reload on this being like superb, but only 4.2 seconds there to be able to reload those 3 shots. Now you might be thinking, oh my god, that's going to be ridiculous and broken, but remember, this tank only has 110 alpha with each of those one of the 3 shots, so essentially you've got a 330 alpha damage, and when you're coming up against Tigers that essentially have everything the exact same as you, but they're dealing 200 damage per shot, then it really becomes down to how often can you get all 3 shots off whilst penning all of them like you're seeing on screen right now. It's kind of a trade-off. Do you want the slightly higher alpha but having to, yeah, basically pen 3 shots to be able to get that, or is it worth just having the higher alpha and playing the standard tech tree tank within the game? I guess that's down to personal preference and what you kind of enjoy within the game. Of course, this is a autoloader, and you can kind of see that an autoloading playstyle is going to be one that's preferable for anyone that wants to play this kind of tank. And definitely, as playing maybe about 10 games with the tank, I think it's got everything you kind of expect from an autoloading tank with such low alpha. It is tier 7, which makes it slightly harder. If this was like a tier 6 with slightly worse armor and it was slightly less mobile or something, then maybe I think that this would be a very, very strong tank within the game. But considering it is a tier 7, you can come up against tier 9s that have, for the most part, if they're tier 9s, they're going to be having way more alpha than you, even with your auto-loading gun, which typically makes autoloaders kind of pointless in those sort of games when the alpha damage of yours is like subsequently way lower than all of the tanks that you're going to be coming up against. Then it becomes a little bit of a problem because you have to land all 3 of those shots, and when you don't have like super high penetration, I think you got 176mm on the standard rounds of the Tiger 1 A18, means that, yeah, for the most part you will kind of not be able to consistently deal damage to the opponents that you probably want to, and that's kind of where this tank lacks, and it definitely does lack within the game. So I think that is, at the end of the day, it is completely down to kind of personal preference, how you kind of enjoy playing your tanks. And I think that for me personally, I've always enjoyed playing like tanks that allow you to have these kind of big games where you can deal thousands of damage, but I just feel like the opportunities with the Tiger 1 A18 just aren't there. And you can see, you know, this is one of the better games I managed to have in the tank, and 2,800 damage in a tier 7 is not necessarily awful. It was a tier 8 game, so getting that sort of result, being able to pick up some assistance damage also helps. But does that mean that the tank is super overpowered and you can do this every game? Certainly not. I've had quite a few games where I've only managed to pick up like 500 damage. Not saying that that's kind of what you can expect from the tank being doing 500 damage, but it definitely is something that can happen and is fairly easy to do that if you don't play the tank right. So I don't think it's very good for new players, someone that maybe doesn't know how to play autoloaders, or someone that wants to kind of move through flanks. Now then, second gameplay, Canals, a map that, you know, does quite well for the Tiger 1, and this is a map that, you know, you can stay hidden or at least avoid taking some shells in between your reloads, which for this tank isn't really that long. You know, most tanks have a reload to be able to fully reload their rounds, probably lower than the 4.2 seconds it takes to fully reload your clip. So yeah, you've got that with the Tiger, which means that you can play in some sort of kind of more unique kind of strategies where you can actually poke people multiple times with multiple clips with this tank. So I guess that's like an additional feature of the tank, as you see us managing to hit the Lycan on the move there. Now that means that although, you know, you do have a autoloader, you don't have the pack-a-punch that a lot of the other autoloaders have within the game. So you've got to be very, very careful with the targets you're actually picking to fight, and that's where I've gone wrong in some of the games that I have gone wrong, if that makes sense, is when I've kind of gone in thinking, oh yeah, it'll be fine, and then it ends up just absolutely taking the biscuit, and you end up just losing so much health to so many people so early on. Obviously with this we have very, very slow rounds on the AP rounds, which make it slightly difficult to actually kind of snap on to people with the autoloader, so firing APCR is not actually that bad. And talking about kind of your ammunition, you want to make sure that you are reloading that on the regular. Essentially, you want to make sure that if you have any kind of lapse in kind of time and you can essentially fire off multiple shots, you want to be doing that as quickly as possible. You see me here, you know, taking the 4.2 seconds to be able to switch out to APCR. It doesn't take long, and so you can get in quite a few shots with this, which makes it 10 times better and 10 times easier for you to push out damage, because there's nothing you really want to do is end up with like only a couple shells in the mag, especially when you're playing a tank like this. It really doesn't go well, and unfortunately we managed to take a hit from the T-34-85 there, who obviously had a slight brain seeing that rounds were coming in from an invisible tank, which was me. But yeah, essentially make sure that you're reloading with this tank if you are thinking about purchasing it and trying it out and just testing it and trying to have some good games, because if you have fired a couple in your shells, that means that you've got even worse of a kind of pack-a-punch, which means that 9 times out of 10, even with 2 shots in the mag, you're going to have less alpha damage than most people. So you do really, really need to make those shots count, and I think that that's where people definitely go wrong with the Tiger 1A18, and why you probably want to make sure that you're using everything in your arsenal to make sure that that gun is constantly firing, because if it has any downtime, you just don't get damage. You know, it's been, what, 3 minutes into this battle and we've managed to pick up 500 damage. It's a very, very slow burner, and so you need to make sure that you're keeping the fire lit throughout the entire game. Otherwise, those moments of kind of cooldown where you kind of haven't got much to do, you're going to be basically, by the end of the game, on significantly less damage, unless you go like all in against some people. And because of the DPM of the tank, you certainly can go all in against people. I wouldn't recommend just YOLOing people, but you know, for example, against this Tiger here, he manages to pen us, he manages to track us, but we can put 2 rounds, he's going to hit us a second time, but what we can do now is just try and hit him one more time, and then we'll get 1 shot in. Obviously we're getting hit from the side, which is not ideal, but so we're going to try and shift. And because this tank is not actually terribly slow, you can move and you can get out of the way, which is something that you won't see from some of the tanks in the game, although, you know, the other Tigers in the game are fairly quick as well, so there's always that. Obviously we'll go through the actual loadout of the tank, what sort of things you want to pick at the end of the game if you want to have a look at those, but for the most part, you want to be playing this tank like a aggressive tank, because if you don't, you're not going to get damage. And I think that's where the downfall is. It just doesn't have enough if you aren't kind of a super aggressive game, which means that for them, if you are in a game where you just feel a little bit lackluster, or you just feel like you haven't quite got enough damage within the game and you need to chase down the damage, you just never get it with this tank. And that's where I probably favour something like a I don't know, tier 7 auto, like even for example the Lycan has more alpha damage, it has way more in the clip, so it's just got that pack-a-punch, but compared to this with 330 alpha after all 3 shots, it's just not nice, and if you miss one of those shots it just becomes an absolute pain as well, and I think that that's where the downfall really is, like we've talked about. Now within this game, you know, it's been 5 minutes, we've picked up 1400 damage, we've not really had super hard misplays. I mean, we went into a fairly aggressive position to be able to get at least some damage within the game, but yeah, it's not worked out too well. We've picked up 700 assist, which isn't awful, adds to the kind of combined damage, especially if you're going for your marks of excellence, and I'm not going to say I am a master at the Tiger 1 A18, I think that, you know, for some people it may be really good and you'll be able to make it work 9 times out of 10, but for me I feel like that it lacks too many kind of the key elements of a heavy tank. It's like, why would I play this tank when I could potentially play another auto-loading tier 7 tank within the game that is faster and relies on, like, you know, the speed, mobility and just having better alpha damage within the clip than playing something like this. So I think that there's really something that can be said for that. I mean, even like the tier 6 STRV down at like the premium version, if you get what I mean, that tank is probably kind of got a better gun than this one. It's faster, and I just think that if you're going to play a tank that has an autoloader like this that's a low alpha, you want to make sure that you can get into positions where you're being very opportunistic within the game, and unfortunately this just doesn't offer kind of the mobility to use positions that you're probably wanting, as we get super lucky on the AMD 178p there. So I'm not going to crap on this tank. Like, this tank is not absolutely terrible, but there are definitely aspects which I think could be better. Like, if you want something like this, pick something else, because essentially you're just kind of a tiger, so you don't really have armor like we talked about, which is bad. Like, not having the armor means that you're kind of like a medium that's slow, like a slow boxy medium that doesn't really have pack-a-punch, and so it's like, why would you play this over something maybe even like a T20, for example? You know, that tank doesn't have an autoloader, but it will have a better, harder hitter gun, and you'll be able to mobilize yourself around the map. So I just don't think that this has enough, and if you're wondering whether or not you should actually purchase this tank as part of the Ultimate Season Pass, or if you just want to purchase it flat out on its own, I think my suggestion to you would be, are you interested in heavy tanks to begin with? Because if you're interested in heavies, then you probably don't actually want to be able to pick this one up, because it's not a traditional heavy, it doesn't have heavy armor, so you're going to lose kind of quite a bit from playing this. Compared to something like a T29, it's got nothing, but it's basically not the same in any regard, and you won't be able to have anywhere near as good results. So I definitely kind of suggest that to you if you're thinking about purchasing this tank. Just, yeah, bear that in mind. It's not a traditional heavy tank. However, what it can do is the things that mediums typically like to do, which is of course track down your opponents and reload super quick, and just avoid people being able to YOLO you, because you can always put pressure onto them, which kind of helps the game. In this, obviously, we've got only 2 opponents left, the T29 and the T28, both of them pretty solid tanks, at least from the front, and unfortunately we don't have the penetration or any premium rounds left within this game to be able to get any kind of solid hits into them, so we're going to have to rely on the fact that we can get around the side of the T28 who isn't looking, and now it's time to use the mobility, and yeah, there we go, we pick him up for the final kill of the game and getting 2,400 damage, which, yep, I know isn't necessarily the highest top tier high caliber game that you want to be seeing, but 1700 base is not awful, and the bit of assistance and 5 kills definitely helps out the game. As for my overall opinion of the tank before we get into what you need to do to set it up, is, yeah, definitely one that I would kind of weigh up. Are you interested in autoloaders? Are you interested in low caliber autoloaders? And are you interested in paper heavy tanks? If you tick yes for all of those, then by all means get this. But if you want a traditional heavy tank, if you want a traditional autoloader that has like that pack-a-punch but has a longer reload, then definitely try and avoid this. I wouldn't really recommend it, and I definitely wouldn't recommend this tank for new players because it will not go out right. I'm someone that's played 22,000 games and I can make it work in some scenarios, but in a lot of the times you just feel like you're limited by the tank itself. So think about that, and we'll get into the stats. So the Tiger 1 A18 in the garage. Let's have a look at the actual equipment that we've got on it. We've got advanced optics, improved ventilation, and we went with traction system. You can't use vertical stabilizers or gun rammer on this thing, so it's very much open to kind of interpretation what you want to actually like pick on the tank, because you haven't got much of an option that is actually beneficial. Could go with camo, but I just don't see the point. Could go with advanced gun lane drive, but that's not particularly useful. So I think the only real ones that I would really recommend to anyone is advanced optics, ventilation, traction system, or swapping out either the advanced optics or improved ventilation for the advanced powertrain, and then you can kind of go with a super speed build with the tank to be able to get that top speed up and maybe make it a little bit more comparable to a medium tank within the game. Obviously we've gone with the advanced powertrain here, or no, with traction system even, and that will boost up our top speed by 4 kilometers an hour, which makes it a little bit more kind of mobile to be able to get in that and get some damage with this thing. So that's always good. So really, really useful. Definitely the perks I would go for. As far as commander skills, what you want to make sure is you get 6th Sense. Obviously then go with things that are going to improve your accuracy. You want to definitely take the reload, which is rapid loading, Born Leader as well. Just basically anything that is going to help out your tank in terms of accuracy. Track Mechanic is also a good one. We don't have it on this crew because it's just a random, well, it's my Skoda crew that I've got. So yeah, we haven't really spec'd it out for a heavy tank. I'm not going to bother making another one just for it. But yeah, if you really wanted to kind of min-max a tank, that's what you go for. All the track mechanics, etc. Hopefully you guys haven't purchased this tank and thought, damn, I wish I hadn't got it. So hopefully this video will be to showcase why you would buy this tank and why you wouldn't, and hopefully that will kind of inform your decision as to whether you want to purchase it. Definitely don't think it's overpowered, and that's one of the first that Wargaming have brought into the game and aren't super overpowered. Same with the WZ-111-66 that we did yesterday, a tank review. So if you want to check out the new Red China kind of WZ-111, you can do on the link on screen right now. Other than that, if you want to check out what actually came out during the update, then make sure to click on the right hand side, which will showcase that kind of update news and articles and the in-game kind of content that came out within World of Tanks console. Other than that, I hope you have a fantastic rest of your day, and I hope you join me back for the next one. Goodbye.